Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video. Today I would like to talk about the kind of two different playstyles or starting positions that Victoria 3 represents to you. I'm talking about that some countries have some sort of more economic focused gameplay or economic focused starting position where the main challenge is about the economy and building the right things and building the right buildings and balancing the different supply chains and different goods, etc. And some nations have the main, even though the economy is a major part, wrestle with laws and getting political change and political clout changes in order to even get any benefits from the increased economic size. Because Victoria 3 is often described as an economic simulator wrapped in a political simulator, and that is true, but in practice most playthroughs lean towards one of those two sides. Depending on which country you pick, the game will feel either primarily economic or primarily political. Like I said, the division exists partly because of history and partly because of how the game is designed. Industrialized powers in 1836 really did have the tools to focus on growth, while empires with rigid institutions or unstable governments had to solve political crises before they could modernize. For example, Russia. We will get into that later. Well, it's also worth saying that this isn't strictly binary. Most playthroughs eventually touch both sides. Even Britain or the United States of America, with a huge industrial advantage, has to deal with the risk of civil war and political issues. If you have made, for example, the petty bourgeoisie, the farmers or industrialists too powerful, and you really want to get to very progressive laws such as multiculturalism, to graduation or proportional taxation, and going to more of a communist society, right? And Russia, that is mainly the issue, is getting off serfdom, getting off traditionalism, right? When that happens and they eventually abolish serfdom and abolish traditionalism for a better economic system, then they can turn into a late game industrial powerhouse with the usual trappings of any modern economy, with the building of the supply chains, etc. So it's not like they these two systems are isolated. They are very much intertwined, but it's more so the starting position, what is going to be your major challenge, right? So I'm gonna break down what it means, what division exists, and giving concrete examples of countries on each side and how you should think about it. Let's start with the economic first nations. These are countries that already have stable governments or favorable conditions for growth. Britain is one of the clearest examples. The name of the game, right? It begins with a huge industrial base, control of global trade rights, kind of, and access to colonies, as in majorly India, which provides them with huge, just free funds to go into whatever economic build-up they want to do at home, while having international military pressure as well. Your main task as Britain is to keep the industrial engine running, making sure resources, infrastructure, and markets all keep pace with expansion. Other examples include France, Belgium, and the United States. I think those are the clearest example. For these countries, the biggest challenge is scaling production, connecting iron mines to steel mills, fueling railways with coal, and meeting demands of the increasingly literate and urban workforce. You already have the laws in place in order for that virtuous cycle to start growing, as in the increase in tax base, because you are already on interventionism and on per capita taxation will increase the amount in your investment pool, and it will increase the amount of people paying taxes because they have a higher wage. So that will increase your revenue, which will enable you to expand more construction sectors, and that in turn will employ more people, and then you have a virtuous cycle going on, right? Now, that goes into the next question: is it why are laws even important? And that is because what I just said, the construction sector construction, tax, and investment pool kind of gameplay loop. On backwards laws, like serfdom, on traditionalism, on consumption-based taxation, the amount of, let's say, return on investment that you get from a building, like a factory, is so diminishingly small that it doesn't matter how effective it is, because you will basically have to fund that out of pocket, because the investment pool is not growing, because the amount of capitalists are growing very slowly. The investment pool contribution is low. Because you are on land-based taxation, then the amount of increased revenue, the amount of people getting wages will not increase your tax base, because the land tax is flat and not depending on income, right? That is why laws are important for even you to like be able to benefit from all of this, the expansion that you are paying for and spending a lot of time doing. You need to have good laws. So for the nations such as France and UK and Russia and Belgium specifically, while politics are in the game, they are still here, right? And getting advancements in more progressive laws is still a boon to you. It's like a quality of life improvement, but it's not existential, right? The focus remains on efficiency and productivity. What buildings and supply chains should I build at what time? How much can I push my debt as a great power, right? That is one of the key things. What drives growth as a great power is that on laissez-faire, especially, you can use the so to speak free money that you get from going heavily into deficit spending into increasing your construction sector. And because of the payback, because you are on the right laws are so great, the extra money that you push into the economy will have ripple effects, like a larger X factor, right? So, and what often matters is the main bottleneck for these nations often is that construction sector. How far can I push it? And you are limited by the amount of money and construction points that you have at your disposal in order to employ as much people as quickly as you can in order to get that snowball running, right? That leads us into a strategy where it's not really super important that the building is immensely profitable. What is important is that how much profitability or how much income or how much jobs can you create the quickest or with the least amount of effort, right? As in on a per construction basis, right? So therefore, in the very beginning, that's why it's often encouraged to build sawmills, because even though logging is not in huge demand, it's not a end good, for example, it goes into a lot of other things, but the amount of people, and especially capitalists, that get employed by them will increase the amount in the investment pool. I mean, increase the amount of people which have a livable wage in one of the quickest ways. That's why it's so strong. Not because it's maybe the most profitable building, but on a per construction point basis, it is amazing, right? Eventually, all players of Victoria 3 will, if you're not playing like Russia or China or something, but mainly with those economic powers, what you will in one way or another, you will run into the issue of in the mid to late game that will kind of dominate your entire existence, is that how do I get more people to work in my country? The usual answer to this is either conquest or migration. The latter often being more powerful than the first. Multiculturalism has been arguably the strongest law in Victoria 3 pretty much since release, because of the mass migration that you will get if your standard of living is high, which, if you have no unemployment, will be drastically higher than anything that the AI can conjure. So if you're playing a single player game just getting on multiculturalism and not and your economy is in good order will bring loads and loads of people from mass, like starving Russians or Chinese or Indians or other European nations into your country, right? So let's go into the more politically first countries now. You compare that to countries such as Russia or China, where these countries have political structures that are so entrenched or unstable that the economy can't function properly until you address them. This is both because of balance, of course, as well as historical, right? And as well as because of game mechanics, how the game is designed. Russia and China and Japan would be extremely overtuned if they could rapidly industrialize with all of that population they have in their country. If they had the same sets of laws that, for example, Belgium have, they could see so rapid and exponential growth because of the enormous, tax base and the enormous amount of people that live in those countries, that the game would basically turn into how quickly can we try to slow down Russia or China, right? So in a game play balance kind of that's why Russia would dominate Europe if they had the same laws as the rest of Europe. But it's also like a historical thing, right? Russia was this great power during the time, but mainly because of their huge size and population, not because of their massive industry. And the entrenched landowners, the aristocracy and whatnot, right, was one of the major reasons why rapid industrialization in Russia was a hindrance, and they couldn't really keep up with their Western counterparts, right? Which means that countries like Russia and China and Japan, if you have been able to ease modern laws into existence, those nations become super powerful. And this has been done previously in various ways, but the major way has been through the Corn Laws journal entry, which historically have given you a landowner, the leader of the landowners, to become a market liberal. And the market liberal is pro laissez-faire and stuff like that. This has since been patched because it was deemed too strong, and now there are players are turning to other ways to rapidly trying to modernize. You step down with your monarch. You rapidly increase political clout with generals. You empower agitators and try to get radical and modern ideas off the ground quicker. So the game really turns into how quickly can I abolish traditionalism, how quickly can I abolish serfdom, and how quickly can I get off consumption or consumption and land tax and get on to per capita or even better proportional, right? Most of the time in the game's current state, it is often worth trying to skip per capita and go into proportional, because when you are on per capita, it's generally harder to go on proportional than if you use all of that radical energy, let's say, to go immediately to proportional, but that is locked behind tech. So we talked about Russia. The Ottoman Empire is a similar. The Ottomans have a similar with powerful conservative elites, and that are like tries to block reform, and you have all of the special journal entries that the Ottomans get to, and stuff like that. So it doesn't really become an economic game more so than how do I navigate these journal entries, and how do I try to modernize with the landowners not rebelling, right? Now, if there are some pesky laws in the way from you and world domination, why not just pass them? Right? That ties into the mechanics of Victoria 3. Political strength, political ideology is directly tied to profession in Victoria 3, for good or ill, as Tarkus have pointed out before. But that means that political change is directly tied how quickly you can change your demographic composition in your country. How can I get people working different jobs? Like how, you know, the more of my country there are soldiers, the power for the military, well, the military political clout is in my country. The more universities and I have, the more the intelligentsia have power, right? And the more factories I have, the more workers will be in it. The more advanced workers, the better. So if you laborers are generally, you know, they align with different parties, but engineers and machinists often align with industrialists and trade unions, right? So if you employ a bunch of people that turns into machinists, that will help you well modernize your laws and modernize your country. Now with you, but this also makes it so that there are different circumstances for small or less, I should say, less populous and more populous countries. If you're playing a very small country, population-wise, say Belgium or Krakow or Sweden, you can like with a couple of factories or universities change the political clout of the country because of how, in proportion, large amount of the population are employed by them. Now, it's not really a strict divide where some countries are only economic and others are only political. It's better to think of it as a spectrum, right? Different nations fall on different points along that scale. On the far economic first side of things, you get countries like Britain, which starts the game as a workshop of the world, and Belgium, but small, but already super industrialized and super progressive laws. Their politics matter, but they're never the main obstacle, right? You also have nations like Krakow, which have like one of the most progressive laws in the game, but starts off really small, and you have to kind of get the rest of the Polish lands and whatnot through alliances and whatnot, right? Because you're too small to stand on your own legs. But if you can navigate that landscape, you have like the perfect setup for a super hyper industrialized game, because you have all of this, like all of that Polish land that has immense resources and large population base, but with super modern laws rather than the progressive laws of Russia, for example, right? If you take a step down on the spectrum, you find the countries that are still economic focused, but do have some political hurdles. France is a good example. It's industrially super strong, but you still have to manage to struggle with the monarchy and liberalism, the return of Napoleon and whatnot. United States have like super massive economic growth, and with their super high migration attractiveness, right? Like the people, a decently good US game, you will have massive amounts of mass migrations from all over, right? But mostly from Europe. That will just keep feeding into the US, which start off kind of small population wise, but then kind of explodes in the mid to late game, right? But you have stuff like slavery, the threat of the Civil War, and stuff that is really holding you back, right? But when you get past that hurdle, you are in interventionism. You have all the setups for a great economic game, right? Prussia is similar. Industrial growth is your focus, but your political reforms don't necessarily you want to unify Germany. So you want to, the whole political affair with dealing with the Germans, the wars, and getting Austria on your side, etc., etc. So even though Prussia starts off with very good laws, but there are still some political intrigue to do, right? Then there are countries that like you can consider right in the middle, where you juggle both equally economically and politically laws shenanigans, right? Japan is one of the good example of this. You can industrialize, but you only after you modernize the state and push through political reforms. Spain fits here too. It's not like weak economically, but it's you know, the landowners and the monarchy have a pretty strong grip, and you still have legacy slavery and whatnot that you need to get rid of and whatnot. So you start, like, even though you have the opportunity to modernize, you kind of have to get through those hurdles first. And Brazil, with a lot of natural resources, but you have all of the, you know, the journal entry of the, you know, it pushes you towards cash crops rather than like a modern industry, for example, and the journal entries or whatnot, right? And then if we go to the political side, we already talked about the Ottomans and Russia a bunch. And then on the far side of the political first spectrum, you have stuff like China, where like the population is so massive and you are so entrenched in landowners' political influence that and the institutions being so expensive that even if you try to go into public education or stuff like that, then you're going to go into a massive bureaucracy deficit that is hard to get out of, right? So and building 200 factories in Beijing will almost not move the needle, right, in terms of political clout, right? So it's all about like how quickly can I get away with and not fall into a civil war? How quickly can I modernize and not fall apart, right? Because that is the only thing holding China back with that enormous population. If you can get that modern laws quickly in place, then and you can get recognized and whatnot, right? Then you have like the entire population of Europe almost at your disposal that you can work in your factories. You can basically play a China game and only build tall, and you will have a couple of billion GDP in the end of the 1800s, right? Yeah, that is all I have for today. Just try to some reflections and some probably on the political and economic side of things. It's a bit of a simplification, but it's a bit of a reflection on how the game works and how I view the game, right? I understand how, from a design perspective and a historical perspective, why they went this route, but it is interesting to think about. So I hoped that you learned something, and I'm glad to be back. It's been a 1-year hiatus from doing Victoria 3 videos, but I'm glad to be doing it again. So check out the rest of my content and have a very good day. Goodbye.